Dr. Richard, you certainly listen to him. He says, without prayers, Africa would have been wiped out by the colonialists. What is the interest of the colonialists to wipe out Africa and not the other continents?
I think that's one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard in my entire life. That without prayers, Africa could have been wiped out. I think God is no respecter of persons. You reap what you sow, and if you don't plant, you will not harvest. You plant maize, you will not harvest beans. You plant beans, you will not harvest rice. And somehow to fixate and make such a ridiculous statement like that, to me, is something that is tongue-twisting and jaw-breaking. That's one. Two, look, I think we love sensationalization as Africans, and that's something that I don't really associate with sensationalism. Sometimes whip up emotions, and that's what some people like, but it doesn't sustain in the long run, because so what Africa needs today is socio-economic liberation. Our founding fathers fought for self-determined rule, but the missing link with what they fought for today is that Africa is not socio-economically empowered. Nobody will listen to any message if he or she cannot put food on the table. I'll keep going back to this. Unless we try to look at what we have and leverage it to ensure that we socio-economically empowered citizens across the entire African continent, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from today, the discussion we are having today will still perpetuate. So what do we need to do? One, we must be able to leverage the institutions we have. We must pride ourselves as Africans of having some structures and institutions that other parts of the world have never ever had. If you take our local governance structures across the entire African continent, which I happen to work with some of them, they have the most structured, well-guided, streamlining approaches that can actually be leveraged to reach millions of people. We're working with the Buganda Kingdom in Uganda, and we've actually demonstrated this. That aside, let's come back to churches. We should not only look at the negative part of what religious institutions present to those that look so. Let's look at it from the perspective of what they should be leveraged. And I think when you look at what Elvis and Aloysius and also Dr. Dimocho said, I mean, they brought up some very excellent points, and I want to build on those. I go back to the point that Africa needs socio-economic empowerment. How can we start to leverage churches as institutions that are accessible to people in communities and use them to drive entrepreneurship in the continent? We can not only go to pray, but let's use churches as we are used to Njangis. In East Africa, here they call it Chamas. In West Africa, Cameroon, Tongtins, and Njangis. Can we make every church to become a Tongting and a Njangis so that resources can be raised, and those youth who have ideas, they can actually access that money to do something to build their skills and to start driving entrepreneurship in their different localities? We cannot only wait and complain when we have structures and opportunities in place that we can leverage, and that will transform the country. Second, and third, almost, we have a country. If I take Cameroon, for example, which I know a thing or two about, Cameroon actually, their middle class is the informal sector. It's the only country in the entire African continent, which I cover, that have the middle class being the informal sector that contributes 50% to the GDP of the country. What does that mean? If you were to leverage the structures in which they have, they are leveraging cooperatives. 1 or 2, 3 people, even when we were growing up, my mother have a Njangi group. They will contribute little money to buy our books. Why don't we build on those with ideas to be able to ensure that at least we can transform our churches to become the bigger institutions in which they become, because we will bring in God's word into it, it should even function well. So let's start to look at how do we leverage churches to work for good and help empower socio-economic transformation from an enterprising dimension. And the last part is that when we look at issues in the continent, whether it is prayers or whether it is bad governance or whether it is leadership, we can discuss that. But you do not fight existing realities. You will not win. What you do is you develop alternative models that can make existing realities obsolete. What does this mean? We must be able to look at alternative pathways that can turn challenges to opportunities. We don't need to fight what doesn't work. What I mean by fight what doesn't work, if there is poverty and we keep talking that there is poverty, just by talking about it will not change anything. We need to prefer solutions. and start to work with the coalition of the willing. And the coalition of the willing, we have 60% of our population youthful. You can only operate from your position of strength. Our position of strength as a continent, our young people. Let's build on their abilities. Let's encourage them. Let's inspire them. And as a result of that, we'll start to have a groundswell of solutions that will then turbocharge transformational development. And last on this particular aspect is that we must start to inspire one another. And that is a personal responsibility. It's not government that inspire people. You and me should inspire one another, starting from our circles. We should start to tell people that they must be able to live a purposeful life. Whether you're a journalist or a climate scientist like myself, or you are a priest in church, it doesn't matter. We must be able to showcase by example that we are kind, that we are selfless, and that we should inspire people that if you don't have a skill, you will not be relevant in this 21st century. Why? Because the skill is the biggest premium. It's not because you come from Com, or you come from Bengui, or you come from Boom, or you come from Southwest, or Littoral, or not, that matters. When you stand on that stage, it is what you can offer that makes the difference. People will tend to know where you come from later. But when you offer value, they take that value that you've offered, and to offer value, you need effort. So life is not a place of ease or celebration as we have been told. It's a place where we apply effort. It's a place of sacrifice. To build value needs effort. And without this, doing so to drive socio-economic transformational development, we will never ever get out of this quagmire in which we are in today.
Okay.
Over.
Okay, we have to end at this juncture. Thank you, Dr. Richard, for passing through this program today.